Nehemiah 1 through 3. Nehemiah led the third group of exiles to Jerusalem about 15 years after Ezra. He had learned that the walls in Jerusalem were still in ruin, and it touched his heart greatly. The first thing he did was pray. He approached God as a fellow sinner and identified with his people rather than criticize them. God brings people and circumstances into our lives so we can pray and seek God's will, not to gossip and slander and criticize. Nehemiah was King Artaxerxes' cupbearer, and after prayer received his blessing to go. Nehemiah knew his source was God. Some of the ites in Jerusalem were not pleased to see Nehemiah coming to help the Jews and ridiculed him. Believer, expect to be ridiculed when you step out to obey and live for Christ. The gates in the wall tell the gospel story. They started at the sheep gate, where the animals were brought for sacrifice. We must start there with faith in the sacrifice of Christ. Many would come through the fish gate, and we are to be fishers of men and share this good news of Christ. The valley gate points to humility and challenges that refine us. The refuse gate reminds us to confess and get rid of the stuff that hinders and corrupts. The fountain gate encourages us that the living waters of the Holy Spirit empower us in our walk. We are to be sponges and sprinklers. The water gate represents God's awesome word that would be a regular part of our lives. The horse gate directs us to be soldiers in service, operating in the full armor of God. The east gate is the first gate opened and gives a glimmer of light. Jesus is the light of the world. The inspection gate speaks of review and reward as we learn to build on the foundation of Christ. Finally, we are back at the sheep gate. We must always remember who we are and where we are from. If we are honest, we will always be mindful of the cross of Christ. Acts 2, 1 through 21. Here is the day of Pentecost, the coming of the Holy Spirit to indwell believers as Christ had promised. The disciples and those with them were gathered together when a noise like a violent rushing wind suddenly came, filling the whole house. There appeared to them tongues of fire resting on each one of them, and they began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Note that this is a supernatural event that the Holy Spirit completely orchestrated and empowered in these believers. They did not need to practice or work at this in any way, as we see some teaching today. The Jews in Jerusalem heard this sound and came together to see what was going on. They heard them speaking in their own languages and were amazed. Note that these are actual languages. They questioned what was going on, and some even accused these believers of being drunk. Peter stepped up and responded, saying, "This is what was spoken of through the prophet Joel." We see in Joel 2 that indeed God promises to pour out his Spirit on all mankind. This is a partial fulfillment of that prophecy and clearly shows the people that the Holy Spirit has come to indwell believers. As we read in Joel, we see that not all of that prophecy is immediately fulfilled, but there is more to come after the day of the Lord, after Jesus delivers Israel at his second coming.